All right, hello everyone, and welcome to a program that Todd and I have kind of been bandying about for a while now, and I think with this year and the continued popularity of stuff like The Hunger Games, as well as the release of films like The Long Walk and The Running Man, this year is the year to do it. So we're going to be talking about the most dangerous game on film, in which we are talking about hunting human beings for sport or entertainment. Todd, would you like to go more into detail about what our parameters are for these films?
So, as the titles established, as bottom line establishes, first and foremost, these are purely based off of works of fiction. It may be inspired by real life examples like gladiatorial combat, we are not just doing a whole thing on on again gladiator films because you could do a whole program on that. Though we'd spend probably half of it making airplane jokes.
I was about to say, Todd, do you like movies about gladiators?
So yes, this will consist of the two particular genres, the hunting humans for sport genre, probably best embodied in the short story The Most Dangerous Game, hence the title of this program, and versions of it where it's more, for lack of a nicer word, institutionalized into basically being a spectator sports. Be it,
Yeah.
yeah, be it as a government program or something arranged by rich weirdos and in their own private time.
Um, I'm going to say this. Talking about rich weirdos, there are certain rich weirdos. I'm not going to na say any names. You cannot convince me they have not tried to do this. Like, I watch Hard Target now, and I'm like, yeah, no, this seems absolutely feasible. Someone with enough wealth has done this. But yeah, so it's again, we're not going to be talking about gladiatorial movies because that is really its own subgenre. And also, there's certain movies that are tangentially related to other films that we're not going to be covering, mainly so we can talk about like different genres, or I guess I should say subgenres of this genre. And I had to give it a shout out to Hard Target here. We will talk about that film. It might be one of my favorite movies ever made. It's ridiculous, but it's a lot of fun. But one of the other things we're also going to talk about is what, if anything, these movies are trying to say about society. Some I think are definitely trying to just have some fun and be B movies. Other ones definitely have a lot more going on in terms of what they're trying to convey. Particularly when we get to the Stephen King inspired stories, there's that, and you know, I will say credit where credit's due for a young adult series. I actually think The Hunger Games has a lot going on, and it's a good introduction for younger people to start considering some of the things that it brings up. So, we're also going to get into literary and real life origins because a lot of this stuff comes from somewhere. So, obviously, there is The Most Dangerous Game, and published in 1924, which, if we're talking about the real literary origins for for these modern day films, that seems to be the ground zero of where a lot of this stuff really came about, and got their inspiration from. But before that, Greek mythology, specifically Theseus and the Minotaur, there's a lot of you can yeah, you could see the inspiration there as well. Suzanne Collins specifically cited that as the inspiration for the Hunger Games. No, it is not another property that we will be talking about later. And I think you can make a good argument for Shirley Jackson's The Lottery for certain some of the properties that we're going to discuss, more so in the idea of and Todd, you're going to bring this up when we talk about The Long Walk and the 2025 Running Man, but the idea of not just indicting the state or the institution that has these programs, but indicting the spectator in the as active participants. And that's where I think we could kind of bring in Shirley Jackson's The Lottery, because that is all about conformity to a degree where you are going to cause harm to your fellow citizen. And of course, there's real life examples. We've already brought up gladiators. There was Cryptia, I hope I'm saying that right, which was a Spartan practice of really terrorizing their captured populations, and some of that did include making them fight each other for amusement, and other cultures did have similar practices. human sacrifice that plays into I mean, if you look at a lot of these gladiatorial sports, it is a more um it's an elevated version of human sacrifice. It's human sacrifice with extra bells and whistles. And a lot of more smaller indigenous cultures that have been around for thousands upon thousands of years, they would have that idea of, okay, we have captured certain people, we're going to make them battle each other out again for our amusement. It was a way to show dominance over the tribe you conquered. And if we're talking about more modern examples, reality TV and sports, and boy howdy, once we get into the 80s and actually 70s too, that's going to become a major inspiration, but it's really going to hit its peak with two films we're going to talk about that are came in the aughts. So where does this all start? Again, as with the story, there is 1932. I love how every single time I do one of these programs, I go through making sure I don't have typos, and sure enough, one of them misses me every single time. So yes, 1932 film starring Fay Wray of King Kong fame and Joel McCrea. So this is the first adaptation of that story. Obviously not the last, as you can see below, Bloodlust, Run for the Sun, Game of Death. These are all movies that were also inspired by Most Dangerous Game, although this was the first adaptation and the adaptation that did it by name. Interesting fact about this movie, this is since it was made in 1932, this was before the Hays Code came into play. If you're not familiar with what the Hays Code is, that was a set of standards and rule books. It was never enforced by the government itself, but it was kind of a moral guardian code. It was like you couldn't show certain things. The villains always had to be punished. It caused a lot of creatives to shy away from more morally ambiguous and morally gray characters. And it did have a heavy effect on Hollywood films from the late 1930s, technically through the 50s, although by the time movies like Some Like It Hot came out in 1959, the Hays Code was fairly neutered at that point. But during like the Cold War, the second Red Scare in the 40s and early 50s, the Hays Code was very powerful at that time. So when you watch this movie, there's definitely some very shocking reveals that might be seem out of place in what a lot of people envisioned films from the 1930s to be like. But keep in mind, there were a lot of very daring and boundary pushing films made in the 1930s. Most memorably is Todd Browning's Freaks, which caused a whole moral outrage of its own.
To this day, they still haven't found the complete cut of that movie.
Yeah. But yes, so this is a film, it does not shy away from the brutality of this movie. I mean, it's 1930s brutality, but there's when you see the reveal of what the wealthy count does with his trophies, it's kind of terrifying. But the story is shipwrecked big game hunter. He then becomes the hunted because he's like, he is rescued by a wealthy count. He has other men there. And then they disappear, and Fay Wray is there. Like one of her brothers was rescued along with her, and the other men are hunted and killed, and they become his trophies. In Rainsford, he's given supplies, and it's like if you survive until 4 a.m., you win. There's also the added extra danger of the count going, well, if you don't win, Fay Wray is my prize as well. So it's not overt, but it is that subtle threat of violence against her. But it is, I would still say, and it's still regarded as probably the best adaptation of the story. I mean, it's the closest to the text, but it's also um it's the most brutal without being like B movie exploitation level. There was a modern updated version of it, but it was released on Quibi, meaning it was released in 10-minute bits.
And is
Um,
probably considered lost media now.
Yeah, lost media now. So if you can find it, try to watch it because it was, people did say when you watch it all together, it's fairly well received. But this is the movie that if you see stuff like The Running Man, if you see stuff like Hard Target, if you even stuff like The Hunger Games, this is kind of the progenitor of a lot of that material. And so we're going to move forward to the 60s, Naked Prey, a movie that I saw about 12 years ago just as a blind selection at my local library. They had the Criterion disc, and I'm like, I'll watch it. It's an adventure film. Um, this is a way more stripped down, and no, that is not meant to be a joke, but it is a more stripped down version of the same idea, which is okay, we're giving you a head start, run for your life. If you make it, you make it. If you don't, well, you don't make it. So this is directed by and starring Cornel Wilde. And he plays a guide. He's guiding some clients through who actually they poach an elephant, they get caught with that, and then when they're caught by a local tribe, they insult the tribe. And this is why I say the hunters have a point. Because Wilde, his character is kind of trying to tell them, like, be respectful of these people. They live here. They don't like it when you poach. They don't listen to him, and they see the people who live there as like, oh, they're savages. What are they going to do to me? Well, his clients all get killed in fairly brutal ways. And for him, they're his I guess, prize for being a little bit more respectful is okay, we're gonna let you run for your life. They shoot it, one of them shoots an arrow into the air and they say run. And once he passes that arrow, they start chasing him. And it's a very good survival story. I am going to do with the caveat, it's a movie in the 1960s. It takes place in Africa. There are some fairly what we would consider nowadays stereotypical depictions, but a lot of people look at it as it's also fair for its day because it was willing to show the African tribe not as bloodthirsty savages, but as, hey, you came into our land and you wronged us and you disrespected us. Why should we treat you with any compassion? Um, but yeah, it's also really beautiful landscape for the film. It's a beautiful film to look at, and I do love that Wilde got sick while filming, and rather than resting, he just decided, no, this is gonna help me. Um, method actors have been around for a really long time, haven't they, Todd?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And if you want a film that's similar to this, again, this is kind of the Mel Gibson film Apocalypto has it's not quite the same thing. It's more a warring tribe was captured or members of a warring tribe were captured, but it is a similar idea of a okay, we are going to hunt you through the jungle. Um, and the way that this movie ends is Cornel Wilde makes it to an embassy. And once he makes it, the leader of the tribe looks at him, gives him a salute, and says, and it's just like, okay, you made it. We're going to honor our end of the deal. Again, another way where you look at this film in 1965, you're like, I could see a lot of movies going a much more gross direction for how to portray the leader of that tribe. Um, but yeah, no, if you've not seen this, highly recommend watching it. Moving on to Todd, you were the one that watched this for the program, Punishment Park.
Ooh. I will say, first up, this is a very good movie, but if you're kind of feeling freaked out by some of the news right now, you might want to sit this one out. This is a movie that turns 55 next year, and within the first 10 minutes, I was watching this feeling like this movie has aged uncomfortably well. As Liz points out in the caption here, it kind of takes place like it is an alternate early 70s America. In this timeline, Nixon has been stepping up actions in Vietnam, and he's basically decided the best way to kind of clamp down on the growing anti-war protest is to essentially start charging these people as effectively anti-government types. The movie takes place over the course. The documentary that the whole thing is being supposedly filmed as takes place over the course of two groups. One is basically a group that is currently in one of these trials, and over the course of the trial, it's like it's coming back between this group on trial and the group before them who are going into the park. Because the entire upshot of what these people are told is once you've been found guilty, you have one of two options. You can spend 10 plus years in the federal prison, or you can spend a few days in something they call Punishment Park. Punishment Park is essentially they set you loose on a trail in what is effectively Death Valley. You are basically used as training by the National Guard and police. They hunt you down. There are areas where they tell you these are supplies. There's no guarantee you'll actually find the supplies. There is a moment in there where they basically find what was supposed to be water is effectively trashed for them.
Ooh.
And again, it cuts back and forth. So it's like you are on the one hand seeing the entirely cruel and ultimately unfair nature of how the Punishment Park Challenge plays out. And you are also watching the trial of the next group of people who are being slated to go into this. And it further drives home like the trial is it's very much show trial. Law and
Mm.
order is openly disregarded. There is a scene where one of the people being tried flat out says, "You can't." And it's like, how can you object to the Constitution? And both the trial and the park, it's as you go on throughout the movie, you're seeing increasingly there is a thumb on the scale. This game is fixed,
Mm.
and there is no one in a position to do anything about it. If this has
Now,
somehow has not swayed you to go like, okay, this ain't for me right now. This movie isn't on Tubi. Again, it is very good, but you may need a palate cleanser afterwards.
yeah. I do have to ask, in your opinion, also as a resident Stephen King expert, do you think this movie might have inspired King for either The Running Man or The Long Walk? Or has he ever mentioned it?
I don't know if he's ever mentioned it. If he did for either, it's definitely more The Long Walk. And even then, he's been very upfront that one of his main inspirations for that was Vietnam itself.
Yeah. And again, it's very interesting that like once we got into the post-war movement where things were fairly decent, I should say for everyone in America because it wasn't, but there was a lot more economic security for a lot of people. And while there was the Cold War, there wasn't the distrust of institutions. We didn't see as many movies like this, but late 60s into the 70s, we start to see more of these movies come into play. So another film that this reminded me of was it's not a very good movie by any means, but The Condemned. But that's the one where they put criminals into an island to fight. This time, for again, it's entertainment purposes. But I kind of looked at this and I'm like, there have been people, the idea of let's have prisoners fight for, or, people we deem as lesser than fight for our own amusement. I'm like, oh, this reminds me a little bit of that, but we're also going to discuss that more when we get to The Running Man.
By the way, a slight clarification on one of these captions here. As far as the if they survive, so I will say as a slight spoiler here, the entire idea is they're sold the idea of the park is it's not that you're necessarily going to be in danger per se. The idea it's like if they catch you, they'll just catch you and then you'll have to go to federal prison. That's what they tell you, and then as you see, it is real easy for things to go wrong and people to wind up dead.
Well, that's why I said if they survive.
But it's like they don't tell them that at first. It's more like, so if you get through, hey, you just don't have to go to jail. Oh, yeah, they downplay that parts.
All right. Moving on to a more corporatized version of a gladiatorial sport with rollerball. And I am not going to recommend the remake. The remake is bad. I think that is one that I rented it from the library when I was a teenager and I turned it off and returned it. I'm like, this movie is garbage. But the 1975 version with James Caan is a lot of fun and it again, I would say similar to Punishment Park has, I think, a more of a relevance now, especially in the age of reality TV. And the more brutal sports becoming mainstream. So, not too distant future. I don't know if it's quite next Sunday AD, but the world is a corporatocracy at this point. Businesses run everything, and rollerball is this brutal sport where injury and death are not just expected, they're desired by a lot of the people who watch it, but that is what placates the masses. This idea, it's you know how we watch the Olympics and we're just so inspired by all of these athletes? That is kind of what rollerball is, only instead of being inspired, we just have the bloodlust.
Well, I mean, that is kind of the interesting twist of the movie is James Caan basically plays the athlete who is like, he's kind of the best of the best at this. He's looking to make a new record. And corporations are starting to sweat this because there's the idea of like, yeah, we want them to watch you. We don't want them to see you succeed this much and start to get hopeful. You have to take
Yeah.
a dive or we will break you.
Yeah, and I kind of look at this because not just in the rise of stuff like more, something more dangerous like UFC becoming more popular, or even you could argue football. Like how many with CTE and stuff, see, and boxing were sports that do leave people very injured, are still very popular. or the joke that was going around in the early aughts where it's like, oh, people watch NASCAR because they're hoping for a car crash, or even the joke of people watch hockey because they want to see a fight break out. You see real world examples of this, and you're like, okay, I guess it's not that hard to kind of go, okay, what if we took this to a more insane degree? I also kind of look at this now with sports betting and just betting in general becoming very prevalent in society. This idea of anything in the world being something that people will just bet on and look at odds. Again, this is another way where I look at Rollerball, I'm like, this movie is more prescient than I think people gave it credit for a very long time. And also, like, the fact that Norman Jewison made it, I'm just like, man, looking at that guy's filmography, it's like, really? Huh.
He was a
But
jackknife in terms of tone, man.
he really you know what? Renaissance man is a good way to describe it. But we're gonna go from the, very polished Rollerball to Death Race 2000, produced by, I think, the undisputed king of the B movies, Roger Corman. And man, we were sold such a bill of goods about what the year 2000 was really going to be like, and I gotta say, disappointed. I did not get a Death Race. I'm sad. But yeah, once again, similarly to more similar to Punishment Park than Rollerball, but U.S. is under totalitarian control, and this is the spectacle that placates people. Something we're going to see in both The Running Man, The Long Walk, and The Hunger Games as well, in terms of stuff taking place in the United States. And this is another thing. We're similar to Rollerball. Accidents and death are expected, but this is the extra rub is if the drivers hit a pedestrian, they get extra points. So this was
So,
Grand Theft Auto before Grand Theft Auto even existed.
so one thing to keep in mind about this compared to the previous movies, this
Mhm.
film was directed by Paul Bartel, who, if you know him for anything else, it's probably the movie Eating Raoul. I say this because the thing to keep in mind as you're watching this movie is actually a very black comedy.
I
Like,
mean, it's made by Roger Corman. I'm not surprised. Or
and
produced by.
like just to give one small example without giving away the full thrust of it, there is a beat in the movie where so the entire race itself is like it's a cross country race. One of the hospitals that is near a major road for this, there's a scene where you see nurses wheeling the elderly out to like the road outside the hospital and like, what is this? Oh, it's Euthanasia Day. The death race comes through here and well, we just roll them all out and it does not go as they expect, and I had an honest to God gut laugh at the way it played
Yeah.
out.
Okay, yeah, I mean, you might even see some things in this that might even be more disturbing than Punishment Park just because it's played for comedy. But I would just say if you watch this, do not take it again, take it as a black comedy. But I'd say even in comedies, there are things that are, I think, ring true. Again, this idea that things are so bad, what are people going to look to for some level, not of hope, but for entertainment? And it's like, well, I can't do anything to change my situation here, but I can watch this. And
I
again,
mean,
we're going to see this in other movies going forward.
yeah, like the president in this openly admitting it's all a distraction.
Yeah. And speaking of the first iteration of The Running Man. So this is the 1987 version. I know Todd being our Stephen King guy is going to have some critiques about this movie as an adaptation, but again, another totalitarian United States. So this is a gladiatorial style show. No, not American gladiators, but these are where the contestants are hunted for sport. And again, this is one where, this isn't just okay if you're out of the game, that's it, you're out of the game. If you're out of the game, you're killed. So Todd, since you are more familiar with the source material for this, I will kind of let you take the reins of this one.
So this is one where, as Lazar said, this takes some major deviations from the source. Like it is still a dystopian America, but in this case, Schwarzenegger is not a down on his luck poor guy who is essentially pushed into the games because he needs to pay for his family. He is a cop who is essentially he's framed for opening fire on rioters. This actually kind of predate this film. It's like both the original story and this film version kind of predicted what would become like the entire modern AI deep fake craze. Because the entire thing is he was ordered to fire on citizens. He refused. Meanwhile, there's doctored video of him out there instead giving the order himself. He tries to go on the run. He is arrested, and then they look and go, "This guy is built like the proverbial brick crap house. We got to put him on the show." And the entire upshot of the Running Man of this version is like it's all this American Gladiator-esque set where these people who are basically prisoners of the state are put in to compete against what they call hunters, who are no. In this version, they're stalkers. In the original story, it's hunters. Stalkers are again much more in the vein of the American Gladiator types. They have their themes, they have their gimmicks. There is a guy called Sub-Zero. There's a guy called Pyro. There is a man in a light bright suit called Dynamo, whose whole thing is lightning. This movie does not take itself at all seriously.
Yeah. And you know what? It's better for it. It is very fun, but as you've said for years, you're like, it's not a great adaptation of the story. The story
But
is
it
a
is an
bit more of
incredibly fun Schwarzenegger movie.
yeah, the actual Bachman King story is more of a downer and much more political, which we will get to when we cover the 2025 version. But yeah, no, this is still, I would say, a very fun movie. Definitely more fun than stuff like Punishment Park. So moving on to, again, I can make an argument this is one of the greatest movies ever made. If you're looking for just beat by beat, pound for pound, a good action chase movie. Um, Number one, it is directed by John Woo, who, if you are not familiar with him, he is a master of Hong Kong action films. Actually, his films like Hard Target, The Killer, A Better Tomorrow, they recently got 4K upgrades from Shout Factory. And he is a legend among action film directors. His action is extreme, it's very ornate, it's operatic in many ways, and that carries over here. Like you have Jean-Claude Van Damme doing like slow-mo spin kicks. Um and there's the what's it the not bullet time, but it's John Woo does a lot of good tracking shots to show the action as well. This is a movie where uh the very wealthy individuals, billionaires, in some cases, like leaders of small countries, they go to places where there's a lot of unrest and they hunt the homeless population for sport. And they do that because usually people who are homeless, they don't have family, they don't have anyone who's going to come looking for them, and they actually screen these guys to make sure no one will come looking for them. Well, what happens is one woman's father is asked to participate in what they tell these men is, okay, we're going to give you a pouch of money with like $100,000. If you make it to this point, you win, you get to keep the money. Um, and again, as with so many of these things, there's a finger on the scale to make sure they do not win. Um, And so this girl's father, he hadn't had contact with her for a while. He was in contact her for a little bit, and then he lost his housing. So she didn't have any way to get in contact with him, but she decides to go down to New Orleans to go find him. And then, Jean-Claude Van Damme, he's there to help her show her around the city, and then he does detective work and realize, wait a minute, Lance Henriksen is hunting the homeless for sport. I must stop this. So yeah, a great action film is had by all, but if we're talking about there is a moment in here where another homeless veteran is hunted and he actually goes into a crowded part of New Orleans and asks for help, and everyone just tells him like, "Oh, get away from me, go get a job." So the movie is trying to make a point about how do we view these people in society if we're willing to just see them as like not worthy of our help. I don't know how much John Woo was thinking about trying to make a point. He probably was. But it is something where you watch it, and if you've ever heard the way people talk about the homeless, you can go like, okay, yeah, like you can almost see a world where this could potentially happen. As I said beforehand, there are certain very wealthy people where I'm like, you cannot convince me that they have not tried to hunt a homeless person for sport. But yes, this movie is a lot of fun, but it has a counterpart that came out the next year, which is Surviving the Game, starring Ice-T and Rutger Hauer. Also, Gary Busey is in it. If you want to have yourself a good double feature, these two films are a great double feature. Because neither of them take themselves, they're trying to make a little bit of a point about homeless people are people too, and they're worthy of respect, and they're also incredibly vulnerable in society. But it also is like, yeah, but at the end of the day, we know we're a dumb action movie, and that's why you're watching it.
It
Um,
is also a the two of them combined are a character actor extravaganza.
oh, they are, absolutely. But between, as I was making the point earlier, one of the points of this film is they don't just snatch these men off the street and say, this is it. What they do is they actually almost have an audition process. They screen these guys and they sell them this idea of like, hey, it's just something for these wealthy men. And in Hard Target, they even have a way of like, this is a way for you to get your dignity back, your pride back. No one's going to look down on you anymore if you win this money. And this is something we see in the 2025 version of The Running Man, and it also kind of plays into The Long Walk, the idea of if you win, you are going to become somebody. You're going to be someone worthy of celebrating. And the idea, like, I feel like there is sort of this undercurrent of like these guys are so despicable because not only are they willing to kill for sport, which is horrifying, but they're willing to prey on the insecurity and the vulnerability of an already very vulnerable population. Probably putting way too much thought into this, more thought than the makers of these films did.
Hmm.
But it is one that I look at it and I'm like, yeah, wow, this movie's kind of saying something, whether it's intending to or not. But yes, both of these movies are a lot of fun. I know we said we aren't going to talk about too many films that are too the same, but both of these movies are a great time and you should watch them. So now we are going to go to probably one of the most famous examples of this outside of probably the most dangerous game, which is Battle Royale. So I'm going to take us back to the 2002, 2003 when, young Liz had the internet in her house and was trying, was also a weeb and was trying to find movies from Japan that she could watch. There was some stuff at her library, but she learned about this film called Battle Royale that was banned in America, and I'm putting that in quotations. Um, and again, look at the tagline, Could you kill your best friend? Cross between Clockwork Orange and Lord of the Flies. Like movie that just sounded so out there, you had to see it. So, Todd, what is the premise of this film? Or the story, because it is based on a novel.
As is so often the case with these, not always, but a lot of time, this takes place in an authoritarian future. And in this case, there is a they have there's like there and one of the things they have hanging on them is something called the BR program, or as it's just called in the novel, the program. Basically, it's like within the upshot of this, a class is picked unbeknownst to them, and initially they were going on a field trip. When all of a sudden everyone on the bus just passes out of the bus is flooded with gas. They wake up inside a room where they're essentially told, "Here's what's going to happen. You all have been fitted with explosive devices. We're going to be turned loose on an island. And it's like you've each been given a weapon, and this game keeps going until there's only one of you left. If there is more than one of you left after I want to say it was yeah, after the 3 days,
3 days.
everyone dies."
Yeah. And there's also on the island zones that if you are in them at a certain time, you will automatically you'll be killed. You're not supposed to be there at one point in time. And this is a program that on at least in the film adaptation, it is a televised program.
That
So
Yeah, I'll say that is specifically for the film. The novel, it's more like they will cover it after the fact. It's treated as like this big covert thing where the most you know about is like some rich politicos will bet on it in the black market setting, but otherwise it's all kept in the dark.
well, again, which kind of goes back, it's like in a way, kind of makes me think of Rollerball a little bit. But the other thing is for this film, like one of the things that or gets brought up a lot is the delinquency problem. So it's not only a way to keep the nation afraid, but it's a way to specifically keep the kids in line and punish the children for delinquency. Or at least that's the story because um the novel gets more into it. There is also a lot of anti-government activism, and in both the book and the film, one of the people that was one of the students, his uncle was captured because he did a lot of anti-government work. And so there is also this idea of, oh no, it's not as the classes aren't as randomly selected as you might think. They actually do it specifically to get these kids. Um, but so this movie's famous for a couple of reasons. Number one, the idea, like, again, when like 16-year-old me heard this movie existed, I had to find it. I ended up buying like a bootleg Korean version, and my parents were like, "Why is something from Korea arriving at our house?" Um, I had to explain that, and let's just say I lost computer privileges for a little bit because they're like, "You cannot order stuff from overseas. You have no idea what you're going to get. Also, you can't use our card anymore." So, you know what? You learn a lesson. You learn lessons growing up. But there's two things this gained notoriety for. So, the first was the idea that this was banned in the United States. So, this was the reputation for a lot of the aughts. That it was banned. And so, I'll say this, the United States, as of right now, does not really ban films. The issue with this was distributors did not want to pick it up. Or they would pick it up with a caveat of you let us remove and edit and take certain things out. And the director of the film and the distributors and producers were like, we're not going to do that. So it never got a distributor in the United States. So I would also invite everyone, look at the year this was made, the year 2000. Todd, what big event happened in America in April of 1999 that made everyone really touchy about teenagers shooting each other?
Now, again, we're going back to 1999, a year where the entire concept of school shootings was still seen as an aberration rather than a
Yeah.
very sad fact of life.
hmm Exactly. Columbine was probably the main reason a lot of distributors got a lot of cold feet on this movie. So, but by the end of the aughts, like Quentin Tarantino, for all of his faults right now, uh, was a big booster of this movie and probably was one of the main reasons it finally got United States distribution. So I'll give him credit there. However, he was also and still is one of the big propagators of the other big misconception of this movie, which is that this was the Hunger Games ripped this film off. So the reasons people give is like, okay, it's teens fighting for sport in something that's televised, and I'm like, all right, well, that's been done already in other works of fiction. The other thing they'll go is like, well, they have the collars and the long walk. The people walking have bracelets to track them. Basically, as I'll get into
Also,
this with, oh, go on.
so even more pointedly, the 80s version of The Running Man, there's a whole sequence
Yep.
where they're fitted with explosive collars in a prison work camp.
Yes, as a lot of more people who know this genre point out, they're like, if anything, both Battle Royale and The Hunger Games owe a lot to Stephen King, more so than The Hunger Games just ripped off Battle Royale. Like, Battle Royale, I mean, I can see the similarities, but if you watch, even read the novel, other than it's teens fighting to the death, that's where the similarities really end. Battle Royale, we actually do not learn a lot about the government. We do not learn a lot about the world these students live in, because ultimately what we're doing is both the book and the movie cover 3 days. In the book, you get a little more look at the past lives of some of the, or not the past lives, but the lives of some of these students. But ultimately, it's a very small snapshot. We do not learn about the world versus the Hunger Games does a lot of world building. Um, but yes, so Battle Royale became infamous for a number of reasons, had a lot of mythology attached to it. I will still say it is a good movie worth watching, but again, if you I can see why the idea of children fighting to the death is something nobody really wants to watch. But I would say if you are interested in it or you want to do some comparison with other films, it is a movie that is now freely available for you to watch. And with that, we are moving on to the Hunger Games series, which I would say probably now, other than Battle Royale, is the most famous of this genre. You know, due in part to the continued popularity of the books, you know, because unlike certain other young adult authors, Suzanne Collins has not gone insane, and she's definitely, and I'm going to say this, I actually think the Hunger Games books are very good. Again, they're written for teens, but they I think do good politics for kids or make it digestible for kids. Also, I think it does better world building than Harry Potter. There, I said it. So the Hunger Games series, this is based on the books by Suzanne Collins. Initially, The Hunger Games, Catching Fire, and then Mockingjay. And now it's expanded to she's written a prequel, Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, and then Sunrise of the Reaping. Both of which deal with past with characters that were in the original trilogy, but earlier in the Hunger Games. In terms of how they existed. So I was kind of talking about how Battle Royale, we don't really know too much about the program itself and the government and whatnot. Polar opposite for the Hunger Games, where Collins goes into the world of Pan Am. It's split into 12 different districts. Each district kind of has its own industry. The districts have different levels of wealth. The wealthier districts actually train their children for the Hunger Games. So the wealthier districts, those kids usually win. In some cases, those kids have genetic modifications to make them better candidates for the Hunger Games. Um, and the movies cover stuff like all the kids, because this is a televised event, these kids, again, these are children, have to pretty much present themselves and sell themselves as a package so the districts will root for them. People will root for them and maybe send them a couple of extra perks and benefits to help them survive the game. Again, Collins talked about Greek mythology inspired her, but she said the Contenders inspired her, and she said the very idea of reality TV inspired her. And if you read these books and watch these films, I think the films are okay adaptation wise. I definitely think Catching Fire and Mockingjay are better than the first movie. Um, but what they do, I think, cover very well is the idea of propaganda in a society, class difference in a society is something that's highlighted pretty consistently. But going back to why the games exist in the first place, it was punishment for a rebellion. And one of the reasons they do this Hunger Games is they take two children from each district. So ultimately, it's pitting the districts against each other. And it's therefore the districts will never completely unify because there will always be this unspoken resentment of you killed our children last year. And that's the precise reason why the government does this. It is to keep the districts divided rather than united against them. Again, for a series aimed at middle schoolers and high schoolers, this I think is actually a fairly meaty series, all things considered. But yeah, this is why I would say, like, I think the Battle Royale similarities end with the fact that the participants are teenagers. Other than that, there's a lot more, we learn a lot more about the world here versus Battle Royale. So, before we get to our final two films, we're going to talk about a movie that was a victim of a number of different controversies, which is The Hunt. So, first off, it was 20, see 2020, oh no. So, victim of COVID, it came out in March of 2020, which is pretty much when the theaters were shutting down at that point. But then it was moved back. It was initially supposed to be released in 2019, but there were two mass shootings around the time it was supposed to be released. And then it's like, okay, well, let's move it back a year. Maybe we won't have the same bad luck. Well, they didn't have the same bad luck, but then there was a global pandemic. But this is a movie about people who are hunted by the elites for sport. And in some ways, it's just basically about how much they offended them. In fact, the main character shared a name with someone who made an offensive post. So it's like, geez, I'm not even the person you wanted to be hunting for sport. So the plot of this came leaked before the movie came out, and all of a sudden, without seeing the film, a lot of people had opinions on it. Blumhouse at least tried to salvage it by marketing it as the movie everyone's talking about it, but the movie and also the movie they don't want you to see. I mean, smart advertising on their part. Unfortunately, again, global pandemic kind of cut those legs off. But it was intended to be a satire about political divides, but a lot of people instead saw that as you're endorsing this political divide. Um, but I do think that's a little bit of a short-sighted way of looking at that. That's similar to saying that Hard Target endorses hunting homeless veterans for sport. Whether or not you think the movie completely succeeds at what it is doing, that is debatable, but it is a film that it's like, yeah, it's pretty clearly the elites are not the people you like and the people you want to follow. Um, Again, you can argue whether or not it's a successful film. I don't know if it entirely is, although I will say it's got a great performance by Betty Gilpin. I think she is incapable of giving a bad performance. But now we're going to move on to the two final films of the night, both of them Stephen King adaptations, the first being The Long Walk. So earlier this year, when we ever covered Stephen King on screen, we kind of said, like, we were shocked that we were actually getting an adaptation of this film because this was a movie that people have been trying to make for a long time and it could just never really come to fruition. Frank Darabont tried to do it, George Romero tried to do it, but this year Francis Lawrence, who actually directed a couple of the Hunger Games movies, was able to make it happen. So Todd, again, resident Stephen King correspondent, would you like to describe what The Long Walk is about?
So this is actually, per the comparisons, this is another where we don't actually know the full upshot of the situation. There is some degree of a America went under some kind of a military takeover. The most powerful figure they know about it is this officer simply referred to as the Major. And one of the things which one of the programs that goes on to this is every year, young it's like young men, basically like teenagers, generally around the 18 mark, they submit their name for something called the Long Walk. This thing, which the film kind of pares it down a little. In the original story, it's 100 that are seemingly chosen at random. The film changes it to it's 50 young men, one representing each state. The entire upshot is once you are selected and you do not choose to back out at the last minute, you are given a canteen, you're given a packet of food, you are fit with a tracker which basically kind of monitors your speed. And once the game starts, you are expected to maintain a walking speed of 3 miles per hour. If you fall under that limit once, you get a warning. If you get three warnings, you get what they colloquially call you get your ticket. The movie establishes very early on what you get your ticket means in a fairly graphic fashion.
Yeah, which the movie thankfully doesn't show too much with the exception of the first person to get their ticket, which is fairly brutal, but the reason that is done is to drive home what this is, which is walk or die. Um and I mean, I've read the book. I gotta say, I'm very impressed with how they managed to make the film and also great performances from all the young men in this movie. Particularly David Johnson and Cooper Hoffman, but the every kid that gets focus, I think, is really good, and you feel for them, like which,
Honestly,
yeah.
Ben Wang's final scene of that movie is haunting.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. And they do. I will say we're not going to spoil it because this is a very new film, but they do change the end or alter the ending to the book, but in a way that I think really works. But um, as we were saying earlier about putting the more emphasis on the spectators, Todd, do you want to talk a little bit more about how this film kind of indicts them a bit more?
So I'm not going to go too detailed because again, part of this gets into a spoiler, but there is a theme throughout both the book and the film version where it's along the way, it's people kind of come out to watch, and there's this question of how much of this is these people were hoping. It's the question of what are they hoping to get out of this? Is this they're looking for inspiration? Are they those people who are hoping to see someone get killed? And there's a question about that with a couple of moments. Like there is a scene where a couple of kids come along, and one of the walkers is flagging, and some of the other people are going like, "Kids, get away! You don't want to see this. You do not want to see this." Because these kids are like maybe like what do you say, like 5 or 6.
Yeah,
They are very young kids, and the other walkers are like, "Turn around! You do not want to see what's about to happen."
yeah. And it's just this idea of like how desensitized society has become to this um death march, essentially.
And there is a kind of dynamic played out between Cooper Hoffman and David Johnson about the question of what does this say about the people who are watching this? Like, are these people again? It's that question of are they complicit? Do they not realize they're doing? It's like, and it's the question of is there a better instinct to still appeal to there? And I won't say where it goes, but as a way to redo the story, it captures the original Bleak tone perfectly.
Yeah. No, and it's a I also good performance by Judy Greer, who's only in it for like two scenes, but she breaks your heart. both times. Because, I mean, imagine being a mother, just dropping your kid off and going, like, there's a very good chance this is the last time I'm seeing my child alive. But it is, you see this. I mean, it was written about Vietnam, but watching it in 2025, the idea of selling these young men this idea of glory, of, being a hero, of masculinity, when it's like all they're selling them is a death march. It's one where it's a very like, God, this is bleak,
Well, I mean, there's
and
also
sadly, it
some of,
translates very well to this time.
some of the way they rewrite it. There is definitely a little bit more of a pointed dig at capitalism with like the entire thing in the Major's opening speech about how product is like general national productivity goes up after a walk. That was not in the original text.
Yep. Also, actually, since you mentioned the Major, great performance by Mark Hamill, a guy who usually plays a hero.
But that's the way things like Mark Hamill was in two Stephen King movies this year. One, he is a very kind of warm, slightly prickly grandfather figure. The other, he is a complete monster.
Oh yeah. Alrighty, and moving on to our final film of the night, as we've talked about a couple times, the Edgar Wright's, I don't want to say a remake of The Running Man. I think a readaptation is a better
Yeah.
way to put it, because this is actually adapting the Bachman story. Is it was funny to read some of the reviews, even by professional film critics, going, "Oh man, where's the fun tone of the Schwarzenegger version?" It's like, well, we're not going to have that fun tone because that's not what the story is.
I mean, meanwhile, it's like from what people I talked to were like fans of the source material, a lot of it's like generally King fans were overall a lot more warm on this than like general film audiences it seemed to be.
Yeah, I feel like this is going to be a movie that more people discover on streaming and going like, man, this movie's great. I mean, I enjoyed it. I had a fun time, and Edgar Wright still knows how to direct an action scene really well. Again, this movie is still very new, but there is a scene where Glenn Powell's character, so in this one, the he goes to a TV network to try out for one of the shows to win some money for his sick daughter. This is a guy down has like been fired from jobs, member of the union, which they one of the guys, Josh Brolin's character, like comments like, "Oh, half the country just thinks they're useless and shouldn't be allowed." But he's been blacklisted for basically bringing up safety precautions at his job. So he decides, that's it. I'm going to see if I can go on one of these TV shows to earn some money. And the show that they select him for is The Running Man, which is there's three people, and if you make it 30 days, you live, and you get $1 billion. And when you watch the show, like the way he's pitched it is oh, you're the type of people that everyone wants to root for. But the minute he steps on the stage, the story that the host spins is he's lazy, he can't hold a job, essentially demonizing him and the two other contestants, so the spectators are more eager to either snitch or kill him themselves.
Because
Um,
so
Go on, sorry.
what are the other rules of the game they have, and this is in the original, and the film actually finds a way to modernize it, is general people are expected is like general people if they spot the runners out in the wild, they can essentially they report them, and so long as the report's corroborated, they get a cash payout. So it's this entire idea of these people are basically being essentially rewarded for selling each other out.
Yeah. And again, similar to the Hunger Games, this idea of, look to be angry at each other rather than angry at the system, as it were. But back to what I was saying about Edgar Wright, there is a great action sequence where Glenn Powell's character is trying to escape a hotel. Um, it's a lot of fun. Again, this is still a very new movie. The other, much like The Long Walk, the ending of this was changed. Only the reason this was changed was, Todd, would you like to tell them how the Running Man story ends?
So in the broadest of broad strokes, the main character story, Ben Richards, he goes into this for the sake of his wife and daughter because his daughter's sick, they need money for medicine. He is coming to is like he is basically put in a situation where he is being flown back to the studio and he's essentially being told, "We want you to be one of our guys. We want you to be part of the game." They're like, he's essentially like, "Why on earth would I do that? I've got a family." Yeah, about that. Your family is dead. And he has a kind of blue screen moment where he essentially just decides, "I've got nothing left to live for." He hijacks the plane he is on and proceeds to ram it into the game's network building.
Yes, so because of an event 24 years ago, that's really not something you can do in a movie anymore. And Edgar Wright outright said he's like, "Oh yeah, I know we can't do that." But I again, without spoiling anything, the ending of this movie does harken back to another a more recent current event, which I'm like, well, that's one way to change the ending of this movie. Also, I now want to go like, can I have a timeline of when this was filmed? But I mean, knowing how film production actually works, that ending was probably written years ago. But it's also one where I'm like, you have to wonder if Edgar Wright looked at the news about a year ago and was like, oh boy, well, not changing it. I've already changed this once. But yeah, no, it is a and this, I mean, the 87 version, while fun, is fairly toothless when it comes to politics versus the new version is it has a very particular point of view, which I think is the most neutral I can remain on this. But I was gonna say, Todd, if you want to add anything more from the Stephen King reader on that, we
So,
can.
I mean, this version does kind of go into again, it goes to the larger dystopian setting where part of this is as Richards is out running across the country, he is seeing beyond just like essentially the rat hole corner he's been living. He is seeing the larger situation at play and also processing more and more of what he and so many people have been lied to about by the news networks. There's
Mm.
actually a great subplot where it's like he tries to bring this up. So part of the conditions of the game is you have to make basically video recordings of yourself to kind of confirm you're still participating. You're not just like holed up somewhere and writing it out. So he would try to use his tapes to then get the message out about these things, only to watch the show and then find out they're doctoring his tapes. So that's he's not only not what he's telling them is not only not getting out there. They're making videos where he's basically again they're demonizing him. He's basically then talking about how much he hates the audience. He thinks they're stupid. He is playing off of them.
And I mean, in the age of AI, or being used to actually make fake videos of real people, I mean, like again, very resonant for the 2025 world.
Yeah.
Again, it's kind of one of those like it's a shame it didn't do that well because I feel like it's with one stuff like one pedal after another. I'm like, oh man, this is a fairly relevant film for this year.
Again, it's one where I almost feel like once people get past the it's not the Schwarzenegger movie, people might start coming around on this one more.
Mm. But yeah, no, it's um but with that, that is the final film we will discuss. And Todd, where do you think? I know they're already filming a new Hunger Games movie, but where do you think the hunting humans for sport, death sport genre is going to go from here?
Oh, geez, I don't know, 'cause especially because like we only just scratched the surface. There are angles we did not even touch on. Things like the Belko experiment should apply to a corporate setting.
Hmm.
Honestly, where it's like one other I will give a shout out to just in really quick passing. It's technically not as much explicitly kill each other, but it's like t take part in a death game. The '97 movie Cube is a much more abstract take on it, but
Hmm.
it's got some memorable set pieces in
Yeah.
it.
I consider the Belko experiment, but I'm like, I don't quite. I'm like, is it death sport or is it more social experiment? I'm not.
It's
That was one
kind
where I
of a
was like,
little of both because for the people involved,
yeah,
it's still the idea of either you play the terms we give you or we will incentivize you to play.
yeah. But it's I mean, again, there's whole other subgenres. But with that, I will ask if anyone has any questions. All right. Art imitates life. Yeah, it's it can sometimes be scary. Although again, there's definitely a lot more laughs in the Running Man than the Long Walk. The Long Walk's definitely a bummer. Running Man is at least got some chuckles. Um, but I will give you a rundown of some of our next topics for the next couple months. So next month is going to be 2025, the year in review. February, we're going to be talking about the iconic Cicely Tyson, who has a really had a very long career in both film and television. And for Women's History Month, I've kind of been kicking this down the road for a bit, so I'm going to finally talk about Rita Moreno, again, another just iconic, legendary actress who made history. in many ways. And also has a very good documentary you could watch called Just a Girl Who Decided to Go For It. And both Moreno and Cicely Tyson have memoirs out. So if you want to prep, you can read those. But with that, I hope everyone has a good holiday season, and I will see you all next year.
See you next year. Thank you so much.
Have a good night.
You too. Bye, guys.
Hey,
Bye.
have happy holidays, folks.
Same